the first presentation for this segment of our meeting today, Cyber Trends, Regional Internet Registries. And to moderate that, we're going to have with us Ms. Leslie Noble. And Ms. Leslie Noble is the Senior Director of Trust and Public Safety for ARIN. Leslie serves as basically ARIN's global law enforcement liaison and focuses much of her attention on global registry data integrity and accuracy. Her work encompasses capacity building, training, collaboration with a focus on regional internet registries and their role in the internet ecosystem, and more specifically, ARIN's policy operations and contractual requirements, and as they relate to data inaccuracy, fraud, and abuse. She has over 25 years of experience in the internet industry, including supporting the development and expansion of the Defense Data Network, DDN, a high-speed military data network that evolved from ARPANET. So Leslie, thank you very much for joining us today, and over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Theo. I'm very happy to be here today. Good morning. As Theo said, my name is Leslie Noble. It's my pleasure to be hosting this session entitled Cyber Trends, Regional Internet Registry Perspectives. Our two speakers this morning are Kevon Swift, Head of Strategic Relations and Integration at LACNIC, and Michael Abejuela, General Counsel at ARIN. So Kevon will start the session. He'll be introducing you to the Regional Internet Registry system and tell you about the work that we do and some of our key services. And Michael will discuss ARIN and the RIR system from a legal perspective. And he'll talk about how we engage with law enforcement, lawyers, public safety organizations, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our first speaker, Kevon Swift.
Great, thank you so much, Leslie, and thanks once again to Apex and ARIN and CASUAL and all of the other sporting organizations for this very informative and timely engagement with legal officers. Just as Leslie said, I'm just going to give a bit of context setting as for the RIRs, Regional Internet Registries, so that you understand a bit better the type of work that we do and how we can go about and support distinct constituents such as legal professionals. So this is just a quick look at what I'll be talking about within the next couple of minutes. And I do present my apologies beforehand. There's a lot more content in this presentation than what I'm going to speak about. But of course, the idea is that you can always peruse the presentation after the event. So what exactly is an RIR? What are our functions? An RIR is an entity that coordinates the distribution, administration, and registration of internet numbering resources in a specific region of the world. And of course, many of you may be familiar with the whole question of IP addresses. There's another type of internet numbering resource called ASNs. These allow networks to be seen globally to be visible on the global internet. But for the most part, most people will be familiar with IP addresses. And there are two versions of those, IPv4 and IPv6. And in terms of those regions, here are the 5 regions in which the RIRs operate. We have ARIN, which serves North America, some of the islands in the Atlantic Ocean, and some of the Caribbean islands. LACNIC, which serves Latin America and the rest of the Caribbean. And then you will see here on the slide that we have AFRINIC for the African continent, RIPE NCC for Europe, the Middle East, and Russia, and APNIC for the Asia Pacific. In terms of our key functions, I mentioned one of them with the definition of an RIR. We also maintain registry services and routing records. So for every IP that is in use, we maintain a record as to the holders of those IPs and the routes that these IPs go along. And then there's a third function, which here you see support internet infrastructure through technical coordination. Let me just give you a very practical example. In order for you to send an email, you depend on the services of an RIR for that email to go from sender to recipient. And I'll just leave it there because there's a lot more technical things I can mention about that, but I think we can talk about that at another occasion. And here is one of the key points I wanted to highlight here. IP addresses are not domain names. So IP addresses are the identifiers that computer use and they recognize to communicate in between each other. That's quite different to a domain name or a domain name where people tend to remember domain names a lot easier than numbers. And what you have is a mapping of domain names or IP numbers through something called the DNS, Domain Name System. So a domain name will map or host a unique set of content. One of the things that is interesting to note is that an IP address doesn't necessarily link to just one unique set of content. And we can discuss that a bit more later on. So in terms of RIR governance, here's just a quick note for you to appreciate here. We are independent organizations, meaning that there's no government oversight. We are not treaty-based organizations. We are all not-for-profit. Our fees come from the membership fees that our members pay for use of the resources. And for the most part, some of those members would be the internet service providers, but there are other types of members such as internet exchange points. We have conglomerates, university clusters, etc., who come to us directly for resources and go past ISPs to set up their connectivity. And we are also community regulated, meaning that all of the rules that the RIRs apply are developed by people from the community. And who are the people in the community? Anybody that has an interest in the administration and the management of numbering resources in a geographic region can participate. So not just ISPs. As a matter of fact, everyone who's here can attend an RIR meeting and find out exactly what the latest policies are. They can make contributions to those policies, and they can even propose policies on how to administrate and manage and distribute numbering resources. We just apply as staff, we apply whatever the community says. And this just gives you a general overview as to the hierarchy or the breakdown of the numbering resources. We speak about the global registry, then the public who is at the global level. This is who is for numbers. And then we have at the global level in the past, we used to speak about the IANA, where we have had blocks of numbering resources distributed to each RIR, which was responsible to create 2 events per year in which the policies for those numbering resources would be discussed, developed, and approved via consensus, and then ratified by the boards of the RIRs. And then there'll be further distribution to ISPs, local customers, etc. So that aspect of community policy is very important. They provide a certain level of certainty and predictability as to what an RIR can and cannot do. We are also governed by the legal framework of the head offices of each of our RIRs. In the case of the Americas, we're looking at US law, and we're also looking at Uruguayan law in the case of where LACNIC is located. And of course, we are also bound by the technical remit that we perform to keep the internet going. This just gives you a quick example as to what that policy development process is like. And it's a clear process with clearly defined steps that anyone could be free to join and participate at some point. One of the things that we do as RIRs in terms of all of this data that we manage is that we practice a lot of due diligence. Due diligence in terms of our customers, so that they say, when they say that they are so and so, we actually know that they are the people they claim to be. We verify their points of contact. We have binding contracts with our customers and ensure compliance. There are repercussions for when customers do not comply with the policies that have been set with the community, and those repercussions may include suspension of services, revocation of resources, and the like. And of course, there's WHOIS data verification, which is an activity. Data accuracy and data integrity are activities that we conduct along with the community and other law enforcement actors. For instance, in the ARIN case, there have been engagements with the FBI to look at data integrity and data accuracy. And I am running out of time, but I just wanted to mention here quick points about the public information in the WHOIS. So the numbering or numbers, the number WHOIS would include registration information about an IP address or an ASN. It also includes the information on IP addresses that we call legacy before the creation of the RIRs, registration dates, points of contacts, reassignment information, and routing information. Information that we do not have at an RIR WHOIS include domain name registrations. IP numbers are not domain names. Certain reassignments. So for instance, a reassignment from an ISP to a private residence that remains confidential, and specific geographic location. And I will hand over now to my colleague from ARIN, Michael, who can talk about what you can find through for a legal process by way of subpoenas and a lot of other useful points for this combined presentation. So over to you.
Thank you, Kevon, and good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for your time, and hopefully we can come away with some useful information that you as legal practitioners will be able to use. So I'm looking at a bit more from the perspective from the legal side of how useful this can be for all of you. What does it actually do that the RIRs, the Regional Internet Registries, ARIN and LACNIC specific for this region, what can we provide, and how will you see the type of information that we maintain arise in court proceedings? And what we have seen is IP addresses and the issue of IP addresses have started to become a little bit more commonplace to find in both civil and criminal court proceedings. So, even just 11 years ago when I joined ARIN, we did not receive as many requests for information and requests for disclosure of documents as we do today, because I think, thankfully, the legal community, as well as just the general industry, is starting to really pay attention to how valuable and how important this type of information can be. But I do also want to be clear on what the usefulness of the information is and the limits to what we can provide. So in terms of the legal work around IP addresses and what the RIRs can provide, it's really the first focus is an evidentiary tool. So when you're trying to prove a case and trying to prove whether there is misconduct in a civil dispute, whether there's a violation of law, oftentimes people will reference the IP address and they're trying to use that as a tie-in to the conduct at issue. What the RIRs can provide is to show you who the registrant of a particular IP address block is. Now, what that means is that what the regional internet registries do is we give out large blocks of IP addresses to various organizations. But a lot of times those are internet service providers. They are not, as Kevon said, we're not providing you information on the actual user of that IP address, the specific party that may be the perpetrator of whatever conduct you're looking into. What we can do is that it'll provide you the breadcrumb along the trail to show the internet service provider that is responsible for that block. At that point, then you can take that information and go to that internet service provider who should have a bit more information in terms of the data logs, in terms of who was using that IP address, who they actually allowed to be able to access the internet through that IP address. So that is one way that you'll see this coming up in court proceedings or in your cases that you're handling. What types of information do we have? I'll go a little bit in more detail of how it could be effective from our perspective in the legal industry. So there are two types of information that ARIN is approached, and LACNIC, I'm sure as well, in terms of what to provide. One is the public information, and then there's the non-public private information. The public information is often captured in our WHOIS database, and that's actually freely available to everyone here. You can just go to our respective websites. You can go to LACNIC's website, or you can go to ARIN's website, and there's actually a search function where you can plug in an IP address, and it will tell you who the registrant is. That's easily available, and at times we've actually been asked to certify the record of what's in that database record so that it can be introduced into court. That is one thing that we can do. It's very easy, and it's just a matter of submitting a request to the respective RIR. The other piece that might be helpful is the non-public information that we provide. Now, that may be useful if the particular registrant of the IP address, these larger organizations, are the party at issue. It would not be as useful if you're looking at the individual that is downstream, a customer of an internet service provider. But the non-public information that ARIN maintains and that LACNIC maintains and the other RIRs are pieces of information such as financial records. How did they pay for their invoices and their bills? The information that they provided to justify their need for the space. So our regime actually requires that organizations, when they're requesting a registration of internet or IP addresses, that they actually show what their need is and how much they need it. And so oftentimes they'll show us their business plans. They will show us what types of customers they have. And so if the party at issue is that actual registrant of the IP address, then that would be helpful in those types of situations. One thing that we do not have is we do not have control over the content. So one thing that we've been seeing arise in recent times is we're getting a larger influx of requests from ARIN's side, at least. We're getting larger requests from lawyers, from private parties that are asking us to take down content, for example, to take down whether it's intellectual property infringing material, whether it's harassment material, whether it's defamation. You know, we've started to see requests to our organizations to say, please take this down. We see this, we've looked it up. We see that you are responsible for these blocks. Take down the information. That is not something that is in the purview of the regional internet registries. As stated before, we have customers that are larger organizations that are the internet service providers, and those are the companies that actually may have some control over the content. ARIN is agnostic to that. We don't have a view into that, and we don't actually have any control over that. One thing that you should also consider, and I know that this is a kind of larger legal issue for the internet and its interaction with the legal industry, is jurisdiction. So oftentimes you're seeking now parties that may be outside the jurisdiction of this particular region. One area that the regional internet registries can be helpful with is that your research may actually find that someone who's engaging in defamatory conduct or who is infringing on intellectual property ends up being on the other side of the world. You know, they could be over in Asia, they could be in Eastern Europe. And that's a little bit outside of our jurisdiction, right? With our typical legal reach with our jurisdiction. That being said, when you're looking at the RIRs and the information that they provide, and you seek the information, you'll see that there are registrants that that may be within your region or within your jurisdictional reach. Now, I know we have multiple countries within the LACNIC region, within the ARIN region, but it brings a little bit closer to home the type of things that you can actually reach out to, the type of parties that you can reach. Because let's say, for example, if there was an organization in Russia, that's on the other side of the world, a little bit hard for us to reach that party. But if they're somehow accessing our community through some registrant that is in our region, that may provide you an avenue for recourse and finding a way to take the information down, be able to try to find a way to have some sort of remedy to the bad acts. So, but I know there's a lot of information that we could go over. We could talk for hours about this because we've seen various types of cases arise. But we did want to at least leave some time, because I know we have just a little bit of time here for Q&A. If there are any questions that either Kevon or myself could answer, and we're always available too if there are other questions regarding the regional internet registries.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevon and Michael. Before we move into the Q&A session, I'd like to very quickly highlight a couple of points made by our two speakers. This may inspire a few questions from our audience or not. The RIRs do have some information that can be useful to lawyers, and ARIN and the RIRs will respond to duly issued court orders and subpoenas and will provide the information as requested. In the case that there's illegal activity perpetrated on us, we will be proactive in pursuing follow-up action with law enforcement. But to be clear, and as Michael said, monitoring the activity of organizations we assign IP addresses to is not really part of our mission. That's one point. Second point is data accuracy is a very important part of our work. We want to ensure that the information and who is that, law enforcement, network operators, lawyers, whoever are accessing is actually accurate. So who is data verification is done up front as well as on an ongoing basis to help ensure that data accuracy. A third point was that Michael made, RIRs have both public and private information. The RIR WHOIS databases are publicly available to anyone. And Kevon went over some of the information you can find in the WHOIS database. But the RIRs also have some non-public information that might be useful to a legal case. We often have financial information because we have contracts and fees for our services with our customers. So we may have some type of financial data. In order to obtain this non-public information, a subpoena or a court order would be required. And finally, I think Kevon made this point that each RIR adheres to and is bound by the laws of the country in which they are headquartered. So with that, I'd like to open this up to any questions that we may have from our audience. And I think you can put them in the Q&A box or even in chat, whichever you find most helpful.
And while we were waiting for that, Leslie, I did want to at least follow up on one point you brought, which was the subpoenas and a request for information. And that's one thing that might be a bit helpful for the audience here is that ARIN is happy to provide assistance when you're looking at the public information. We mentioned the WHOIS lookup, which is the database that has all that information, but we also have non-public information. In terms of the non-public information, a duly under court order or subpoena requesting that disclosure, we're happy to receive that and review it and then process it, in accordance with the terms of that order. So we do that quite regularly, and people have asked us for specific information. The other piece of that is that when you do any type of request like that, it would be helpful if there's specific scope in terms of date and time. So we have the WHOIS registry, which provides the information as it stands today, but we also have a thing that we maintain called WHOWAS. And so while Leslie brought up the good point that we look at data accuracy and that we want to maintain an updated database, you may be dealing with an action or an event that happened maybe 2 years ago. So we do maintain a historical maintenance of the information in terms of who was the registrant at that time. Because if you look at it today, but the action was 2 years ago, today's information may not be as helpful, but we also deal with the historical information, and we regularly receive requests like that, both from law enforcement, in criminal proceedings, as well as civil disputes where someone requests the information as it pertains to a particular date and time. So to the extent that you can do that, it makes it even more helpful in terms of the information that you'll receive.
Great. While we're still waiting for questions, I just wanted to add to what Michael was saying that the RIRs, we do engage quite regularly in awareness building and capacity building activities. So one of the things I didn't mention before is that the 5 RIRs, we collectively work under something called the NRO, the Number Resource Organization. of which one of its subgroups deals with public safety, for which Leslie and myself, we are the representatives from ARIN and LACNIC respectively. So you would find that the discussions are happening in one part of the world. We do become informed about what they are, and we do include those sort of inputs into the sort of content and materials that we can develop when we do our outreach and our capacity building activities. I put in the chat here right now 2 links. One is a link for law enforcement, particularly in terms of what you can do to, well, what you need to do in case you're looking to send a legal order to LACNIC for the non-public information in the WHOIS. But we also have a discretionary service which deals with LACNIC staff being able to help someone who's requesting this information, help them interpret exactly what is in the WHOIS database, because if someone isn't quite familiar with it, they may be a bit confused at the onset as to the distinct pieces of information that you can see inside of there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to ARIN and LACNIC for this wonderful presentation. And specifically for supporting outreach and awareness building amongst the legal practitioners in this forum. I'll move to the next one, but thank you very much. I think it lays out for us the framework and gives us a sense of the importance of these regional internet registries in terms of the fundamental and underlying framework of the internet.